The MMORPG genre is a multi-billion-dollar mainstay in the global gaming landscape, but how did we get here? Which games are the most important? Which games took the risks, advanced the genre the most, or had the most cultural impact? Let's discuss which MMORPG was the most important to creating the genre we know and love today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Drive Hayes. The creation of anything artistic is an arduous, often destructive process right up until the moment where we figure things out and work out the best way to do any given thing. There's a famous phrase, "If I've been able to see further than others, it's because I've been standing on the shoulders of giants." This phrase is actually inscribed around the side of a British £2 coin. The meaning of the phrase is, if one person's able to achieve something, they're often able to do it because they can harness the lessons learned through both the successes and the failures of those who have come before them. So, as far as MMORPGs go, what were the successes? What were the failures? What were the most important moments within the genre's history, and how did they help us get to where we are today? Let's explore. Before we begin, consider dropping a like on the video or subscribing to the channel for more MMORPG stuff. Ring the bell for all the future notifications, and as usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. More on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. We start by going back to 1980 with a single-player adventure game called The Dungeon of Kazmai, a fantasy adventure inspired by tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons, and this is actually where the fantasy in MMORPG dominance comes from. Only 2 years later, The Dungeon of Kazmai would be used as inspiration for what many would consider to be the first multiplayer online adventure game with a graphical interface, The Island of Kazmai. It was extremely rudimentary by today's standards, processing one command every few seconds, using ASCII graphics to render everything from the map to the player icon to enemies, and having most of the game delivered through text. Island of Kazmai was basically a graphical mud or multi-user dungeon. It was expensive to run and exclusive to members of the CompuServe internet company. But this is considered by many to be the first graphical, online, role-playing adventure game. Remember, this happened in 1982, and the home computer wasn't yet super popular. In fact, it was pretty much limited to education or military facilities to have access to the technology to be able to play this game, universities mostly. In design or development, there's a strange paradox where it can actually be beneficial to be the second person to do something, because you're able to harness all the lessons learned from the first failure and try again when technology reaches such a point that it's actually viable to be a success within the environment. You can take what the first generation did, scrub the flaws, and improve dramatically in only one iteration. Island of Kazmai was definitely the start of something, but it wasn't in a position to capitalise on what it had. The technology wasn't popular enough, it wasn't affordable enough, but this was the first important moment. The start of graphical online multiplayer adventure games. Now jump forward 17 years to 1999. Online games had come and gone, and they'd found niche appeal, but 1999 brought us an MMORPG that even non-MMO players will likely have heard of. Everquest. A 3D third-person online adventure game set in a massive shared overworld with various classes and abilities to choose from and level up, quests to do and weapons and armor to collect. The gaming conventions Everquest set are still considered standard design for many modern games, but it's not Everquest itself I want to look at. It's the rivalry between Everquest and Ultima Online. 2 years prior, Ultima Online had released a top-down isometric view adventure game, set in a brutally harsh world. Ultima Online was the continuation of the long-running Ultima franchise, and also the first time the importance of franchise recognition was seen in the MMORPG landscape. Ultima was popular, extremely popular, and when Everquest came along to challenge it, one of the greatest MMO rivalries began, and if there's one thing that advances technology at a breakneck pace, it's a rivalry. If any project or company ever becomes so dominant that it can't be challenged, it's often bad for the consumer. No longer is it about innovating and creating and attracting new customers. It's now knowing you've got the customers trapped. It's a captive audience, so you can fleece and drain them for as much money as possible. You see this all the time in internet providers or phone coverage providers in certain geographical regions. When you are the only choice, what are the customers going to do? Go somewhere else? They can't. You've got them. A rivalry, when two companies are close and they're both going for the same demographic, causes a technological arms race, a gameplay race to see who can be the best, and it's often very beneficial for the consumer. We benefit when two companies want to outdo each other. Ultima Online and Everquest were both remarkably successful, not completely mainstream yet, but big enough to make a lot of money and prove the MMORPG was here to stay, and the rivalry only fueled the gameplay arms race. This is the second important moment, the moment two games recognise the potential of the genre and are actively willing to compete to succeed, because it shows companies the MMO demographic is worth fighting for. The next important development happens only 2 years later, in 2001, with the release of classic Runescape. Runescape began life as a simple isometric adventure game known as Devious Mud a few years before, and the change it brought to the MMORPG landscape I personally believe is one of the greatest and most important updates in the history of the entire genre. Runescape did not need to be downloaded. It could run directly from the browser, and it would remember your character data on RuneScape's server, so a single RuneScape character could be played across multiple computers. Back in 2001, the home computer boom was in its early stages. Well-off families might own a computer and often dedicate an entire room of the house to it. 90s kids will remember the computer room, but billions of people still didn't have access to home PCs, so they would often use computers at school or public libraries. One problem with public, educational or military computers is they often don't allow you to download or install programs because of the security settings. So all those big MMOs like Everquest, Meridian 59, Asheron's Call, Ultima Online, you couldn't play those on a public computer because you needed to download them. But RuneScape, you could play. It's very hard to overstate how important this update was to the popularity of the MMORPG. Lowering the barrier of entry for any given thing will massively increase the amount of people who want to take part and are now able to take part in that thing. Everquest and Ultima Online were great, but they required a good PC, a good internet connection, and money. RuneScape could be played anywhere, even on public computers, schools, and libraries. If you found a computer with internet access, you could play RuneScape. This step is a major moment in the history of the MMORPG, the moment accessibility increased exponentially. Island of Kazmai may have been a proof of concept limited by the technology at the time, and Everquest and Ultima showed that the player base was there, but RuneScape brought almost unlimited accessibility, and it's impossible to overstate how important it is to make your product available to the most amount of people. The main issue the MMORPG was facing now was it was still niche. Everquest and Ultima battled away while RuneScape dominated public libraries, but it still wasn't a mainstream genre. That change would happen in 2004, with the creation and release of World of Warcraft. Blizzard Entertainment had been releasing hit after hit of PC games, the real-time strategy franchise Warcraft, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3 and StarCraft, and the hack-and-slash game Diablo and Diablo 2. Blizzard were on fire with successful game releases, and when they decided to create an MMORPG based on the Warcraft franchise, they decided to do the one thing no MMORPG had yet done: attempt to break the game into popular culture. Blizzard's marketing strategy was genius and legendary, using TV adverts with popular celebrities to bring the MMO out of the basement and into the limelight. Suddenly, staring at a screen going on a fantasy adventure wasn't just a thing for nerds, because now you had Chuck Norris telling you to do it, you had Mr. T, you had William Shatner telling you to do it. Cultural icons associated with World of Warcraft, and then possibly the best marketing stunt for an MMORPG of all time, they got a South Park episode. Even people who haven't watched South Park have seen that episode. Even people who haven't played World of Warcraft have seen that episode. It is possibly the single most popular piece of MMORPG advertising in history. Make Love Not Warcraft brought the MMORPG into the mainstream. This is the fourth moment, the moment the genre became mainstream. And even non-gamers not only became aware of it, but suddenly became interested in playing it. And the player base reflected this. Blizzard leveraged the success of the Warcraft franchise, then spammed TV adverts with Ozzy Osbourne and Jean-Claude Van Damme. They took over the MMORPG world for years. And that brings us to now. 4 major events so far. The Island of Kazmai, showing that the genre could indeed be a thing. The rivalry between Everquest and Ultima, pushing companies to innovate and create, to grab the audience's attention and be the best MMO they could. RuneScape lowering the barrier to entry and meaning all you needed was a computer and an internet connection to play. World of Warcraft pushing the MMORPG into mainstream recognition. And now, I believe we're on the verge of the dawn of the 5th most important moment. The moment when crossplay, breaks down console and PC barriers and allows all players of one MMORPG to play together, regardless of how they're playing it. Video games are now the biggest entertainment market in the world. They make more money than films and TV, but we as gamers are still divided along console lines: PlayStation, Xbox, PC, mobile. With RuneScape making MMORPGs accessible to everyone with a PC and an internet, we are now at a stage where there's no real technical reason we can't make MMORPGs accessible to anyone with a console and include crossplay. Because while MMORPGs are now on console, such as The Elder Scrolls Online or Neverwinter, they're not connecting the complete community, as they often use different servers. This will be the fifth important stage when it finally happens. Final Fantasy XIV has cross-platform play from PC to Mac to PlayStation, but not to Xbox. RuneScape Old School and RuneScape 3 both have mobile clients that communicate with each other, with cross-platform gaming if you're playing the same version, and cross-version messaging using the in-game systems. The fifth major moment in MMORPG history will be when the big MMORPGs come to console with no restrictions on servers and grouping, when I can play on PC, you on PlayStation, someone else on Xbox, and we all adventure together. It's probably a few years away, and I'm sure there will be people saying this will never happen because of company differences, but hey, if you told players of Island of Kazmai one day we'd be here, they'd probably have a hard time believing that. If I say to someone, hey, come and play this game with me, they should be able to say, okay, and then it doesn't matter what we have at home. A Windows PC, a Mac, a PlayStation, an Xbox. A true gamer loves the game, not the game console. And as more MMORPGs become made by real, passionate gamers, I hope we can break down those console barriers and bring love of the game to the forefront, not necessarily love of the console. Which side were you on in the Everquest versus Ultima battle? What do you believe the most important moment in the MMORPG development phase was, and have I missed any super important moments? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive. You can support from just £1 a month and help shrink the text. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and our Discord. And as always, have a great day.